So welcome back. Let me show you an example of how I wrote this literature review. It was actually written by my student. I think of course, we worked together through all of this, but this was mostly her work, and this is how we did it. Another thing is like you don't have to follow my advice, like extremely exactly as I say. Like don't follow me perfectly as I say. You can add something about you. What I give you are like the main ideas and the things that you should follow, but the way that you do it, the final thing, it can be a bit different as long as it has or it achieves the objectives that the literature review has. So let me show you this literature review because I think it's really interesting how she wrote this, and and also, this is a qualitative paper. So in case that you chose qualitative methodology, this can be very useful for you. So this paper is about this. It's about the impact of an incubation process on the management control systems of startups. So as you can see, not just by reading the title, you understand that the incubation process is an important concept. Management control system is also another important concept. So that's the structure of the literature review. The literature review is management control systems in startups, and then this is the first subsection. The second subsection is business incubators and the incubation process. That is the second important concept, right? You can read from the title. One is management control systems and the other one is incubation process. And in the end, the last subsection is the mix of these two, like management control systems and the incubation process. That's when you mix these two. As you can see, she didn't write an introduction in the literature review, so that's why I say it's optional. I usually write an introduction. Some people do, other people don't do this. So it's up to you, don't worry. So she started right in front with the definition or with the subsection about management control systems in startups. So you can see the very first sentence, it's traditionally management control systems were conceptualized as a type of accounting system. So that means that is the very first line. This is what I said earlier in the presentation, that acknowledge that there are different definitions. So she says, usually management control systems are defined as this, but this view has changed. And then she talks a little bit about different definitions. This is where I am telling you that you talk about different papers. Like she says, like this paper, I think this is a book, uh, uh, thinks more about behavior in terms of control instead of just financial mechanisms. So it's not only about numbers, it's also about behavior. And then she writes into, she continued writing into that, like here. Similarly, this other author focuses on controlling employees' behavior, right? So it's building on the same thing. Then Simons, again, another author, says, again, the same thing, organizational behavior. You see how coherent she is when writing this? It's like, uh, usually we think that controlling, it's about numbers, but it's not really like that. It's not only financial mechanisms, but also behavior, such as, I think this is her quote, her reference, Malmian Brown. So this other guy, Merchant and Van der Steed, they also agree with that. There's Scoldings again, Simons again, this other guy too. So you can see how coherent that definition becomes, and it becomes very powerful because it really convinces you. It's not only an idea that it came into my mind that control is not only about numbers, it's also about behavior. Controlling behavior, not controlling numbers. It's controlling behavior. It's also important, and it's not only because I invented this or I had a dream about this. It's actually really documented in the current literature. And in the end, I think she finishes by more or less problematizing this definition, because I think she says that, um, where it is. Yeah, I think here she says that, okay, so control is not only about financial control, but also behavior control. But the effect on the outcome of that control it's not clear if it's going to be positive or negative. That's what she writes in here. More recent literature found conflicting results. So she then argues like, okay, so the definition of management control systems is that it's about numbers, but also about behavior, which is clearly important. That's the focus that I'm going to use in my study. But that definition is not perfect because it doesn't explain or it doesn't state if the effect on the organization is going to be positive or negative. So as you can see, it's really clear the story that she's going to write later on. I hope that you can do the same thing. Don't worry, this is the first try and it's okay. It's not going to be the end of the world if you don't get it in the first try, but I think you can find some ideas from this. And now let me show you another paper that this one is quantitative because I think I stated some hypotheses. And I think it's this one. This one it's a bit more complex. I think I spent a year writing this paper, so it's quite rich in terms of concepts and the arguments and everything. But and I think the other one is very simple. This one is a bit more complicated. But let me give you the story about this paper. This paper is about the effect on the global mindset. So this is the first concept that's important. When you do an international short-term trip. So it's if you do a short-term trip, in this case is the Vulcan trip. I think some of you went to New York, the Vulcan in the Vulcan course with Maria Elena. That if you go to that thing, it's going to have an effect on your global mindset. So in this paper, I think that the important concepts, because I think I have a figure about this, are in here in this figure. What happened? Ah, no, it's by the end of this. So it says that if you do a trip, it's going to affect your global mindset somehow. That's the main relationship. But as I say, this paper is more complex. This paper says that it's not as simple as that. It's part of that effect on the global mindset, or that change on the global mindset is not only explained by going to the trip, but also depending on the professional aspirations and the networking skills of the student. So these things are mediators of the effect. As I said, this is a very complex study. I don't expect something that complex. But in the end, the way in which I wrote the literature review, it's again the same structure. Is I define what's the global mindset, I define what is an international short-term trip, and I define what are these two things. Let me show you in the literature review section. It should be around here. No, here, literature review. Because I wrote this paper, this section was written by me. I used my formula. So I use a short introduction, the one that I suggested you. Then I define international short-term trips. So these international short-term trips are important in the literature, and these trips are conceptualized as blah, 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 blah. So this is my definition. This is international short-term trips. And then here I talk about kind of the importance of short-term trips. Uh, why are short-term trips done? That's the perspective that I want to take. It's because they want to develop the global mindset that I will explain in a second. What's the global mindset? That the trips are not made just to go and have fun. That the trips are made have a purpose and a purpose on developing something about the students. And all of these references are about that, developing things on students. Then I of course, again, I define the global mindset. And as you can see in here, I even write like that. A global mindset is defined as blah, 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 blah. The concept, and all of these references are just building into the first one. It's like they are very coherent with that one. Here, I add the papers because I want to show the reader that I am an expert in this very narrow topic. So I like take a look at this. I think like this one. Lee found that students who attended to the short-term trips developed their global mindset much further compared to students who did not attend. Moreover, the authors also found that the trips can be an efficient method to develop a global mindset in Chinese students. So I am uh, more or less describing the study about these guys, and I even mentioned that it's from China. And I think that around there, by the end of this subsection, instead of writing the call for action, I wrote the hypothesis. Short-term trips develop the global mindset. That's a very clear hypothesis. Then professional aspirations. Again, I define what is professional aspirations. I give a lot of examples from different studies about professional aspirations, and in the end, I state a hypothesis because this is quantitative. If you are doing qualitative, remember, it's not about that. And if you are doing qualitative, it's the call for action. It's like, okay, what's wrong with this? Why am I doing beyond what has already been done? And the same for networking skills. And here I have the 5 hypotheses. So as I remember, most of you are doing qualitative. So in the end, try to do that. Try to do pick up the 2 big concepts that you're going to talk about. Is it about software implementation? Is it about organizational structure? Talk about what is this? What is this? And in the end, what is beyond that? What hasn't been answered by the literature? So I think I will stop in here. This video, I will continue with the end, which is more or less giving you advice on how you can solve the activity.